Assalamualaikum, my name is Arfat and welcome to a brand new video. Inshallah ta'ala, I will continue my series here on the Hebrew Bible. The reason why I wanted to start this series is because that I want to go through with you the entire Hebrew Bible as well as the New Testament. And we will split this series into two. I've done this before in the past, but now I'm doing it again because in the previous videos that I've done, a lot of you guys mentioned that the audio quality is not there, it's not clear. So nevertheless, I've stopped that, postponed that for a while, and now that I have the gear, the resources, inshallah I can better do this so that you can hear me much clearly, I hope. Anyway, we will begin the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. There's a difference between the two to begin with. The Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, they're not the same. When we refer to the Old Testament, we are following the order of the Old Testament books. But that is not what we will be doing here, inshallah. Instead, we will be following the order of the Jewish Bible, okay, also known as the Hebrew Bible. So for example, the book of Chronicles will appear last in the Hebrew Bible, whereby in the Old Testament it will appear towards the earlier portions of the book. Now, the Hebrew Bible is split into three parts. We have the Torah or the Pentateuch, and then we have the history, the historical books. And then the Navim, and then we also have like later writings as well. I'll be using the Jewish Study Bible as my reading for this series that I'll be doing. Now you can also use the Old Testament that I have, the NKJV or the NRSV, but I prefer the JPS. Because we are approaching this from the Jewish perspective, so we have to use their books. But if you want to use the NRSV, that is fine as well. In fact, that is what a lot of scholars would use, the NRSV, because the JBS can be sometimes theologically motivated in a sense. But because I'm using the Jewish Study Bible, because the commentary here is excellent, and because the difference is that the Christians have read back their theology into the Hebrew Bible. And so the reason why I want to use the Hebrew Bible is that when we get to the phrases like Son of Man, for example, the name of Yahweh, for example, when he revealed to Moses, we will get to that inshallah ta'ala far away from now. But we want to see that it is not actually the name of Yahweh, for example. It basically means I am who I am, or I am He, okay, or I am the being that call out to you, for example. And it is not actually the name of God. And so Jesus is not being called God anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. And the phrase Son of Man and Son of God doesn't have any divine connotations to it, as we will see from the series here that we will be doing. And then to supplement this, I'll be drawing materials from three different kinds of introductory textbook. First is John J. Collins' Introduction to the Hebrew Bible, the 3rd edition. And then I also have here the Old Testament by Michael Coogan and Cynthia Chapman. Introduction to the Bible by Professor Christine Hayes. And also I'll be using readings, the ancient literature readings, but I'll tell that more in the coming videos when we get to that. So we will begin here. The way that I'll approach this is that I'll try to keep it to about 20 to 25 minutes each. So we will not be able to cover the entire book in one day. And I also want to read to you as much as I can. And then I'll explain to you, and then I'll also go through the works of what the scholars say about the book. And so inshallah ta'ala. Now the book of Genesis, the Bible begins with the book of Genesis, which means beginning, and hence more literally means birth. Okay, the book of Genesis is a narrative about the beginnings of the world as the ancient understood it, of the first humans, and especially of the ancestors of Israel. The entire narrative is tied together by a series of genealogies or births, beginning with the generations of the heavens and the earth. Okay, this is Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 4, and continuing through Adam, Isaac, and Jacob to the sons of Jacob, the 12 sons of Jacob. Genesis can be divided into two major sections, but as you can see, the way I approach this, I'll divide it into a lot more sections and towards more subsections. Chapters 1 to 11 consist of accounts of cosmic origins, including the creation of the world, the Garden of Eden, and the first humans until the flood, okay, the flood of Noah, linked to these chapters by genealogies. And then chapters 12 to 50 contains the beginning of the story of the Bible's principal focus, that of ancient Israel. In them we read of Israel's ancestors, such as Abraham and Sarah, his wife Isaac and Rebekah, okay, the wife of Isaac is Rebekah, Jacob and his two wives Leah and Rachel. A funny story here, Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, but he was tricked to marrying the sister of Rachel, Leah. Okay. And then also Zilpah and Bilhah and their children. From all these four figures, we get the 12 tribes of Israel. Like most of the books of the Bible, Genesis is a complex work. It was compiled over many centuries by ancient writers who made use of all sorts of historical and literary materials. It was given its final form during the second half of the millennium, okay, BCE obviously, long after the occurrence of the event it narrates. And so we are approaching this from a historical perspective. The orthodox view is that the entire Bible, or at least the Tanakh, at least the Pentateuch, the Torah, also called the Torah. Now, the Torah can be inclusive of the Mishnah and the Talmud, so that's why I like to refer to it as a Pentateuch. But in this series, when I'm using the word Torah, I'm mostly referring to the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Okay, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And so scholars do not believe that these books were written by Moses, because Deuteronomy 34, it ends with the death of Moses. Okay, and how could Moses write the book? At least the book of Deuteronomy is not by Moses. But there's a lot of evidence that we will go through, inshallah ta'ala, that the entire Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, is not written by Moses, because as we will see, there's a lot of additions, subtractions, contradictions in it. Surely if there's one author, he will not contradict himself. A major accomplishment of the modern biblical scholarship has been the identification of many stages of this development. Because of its importance and its complexity, Genesis will be treated in the next several chapters. Okay, this is what the Old Testament here say. What Michael Coogan say. Now, having given that summary of what the book of Genesis actually is, we will begin reading the book of Genesis. Okay, this is Genesis 1. When God began to create heaven and earth. Okay, the earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind from God sweeping over the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Now, just to compare with you, okay, Bereshit 1:1 or Genesis 1:1 begin with when God began to create. If we have the NKJV here, okay, we read, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Now, there's a difference here. And so this is a theological difference between the one who produced the NKJV and the KJV, as well as the NIV here. I'll just read you the NIV. Okay. The NIV also begins with, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Okay. And so it is theologically motivated here. Um, Now, without going into too much exegesis here, because that is interpretation of scripture, hermeneutical, which is not what I intend to do, but just to give you the differences here. The NRSV also has when God began to create the heavens and the earth. Now, if we look at the ancient understanding of, if you look at the epic of Gilgamesh, for example, and Enuma Elish, we will get to this possibly in the next video. But the way the ancient people understand is that before God began to create other deities, for example, or human beings, okay, there was already a watery substance in the earth. And if you look at the work that Michael Coogan has published, he says that the Hebrew here doesn't support the reading that has been rendered by the KJV and the NIV. Okay, the reading of the Hebrew here support that when God began to create the heavens and the earth, this implies that there's already something going on, and then only God began to create the heavens and the earth. Okay, something has already been created, and if we understand the ancient Near East text and so on and so forth, it is more like a watery substance was already there. Okay, and if you look at Enuma Elish, we have Tiamat and Marduk. Tiamat created all these other gods, okay, and then they began to make a lot of noise. But Tiamat has been identified or associated with the saltwater ocean, for example. Okay, so when Tiamat created the other gods, okay, and things like that, we will get to that in the next video, inshallah. But basically, if we look at the reason why the NIV and the NKJV is because if we go to the prologue of John here, okay, in the beginning was the Word, okay, meaning that a lot of Christians have been the reason why the NIV and the NKJV, the committee obviously more Christian centric, and so they want to harmonize the reading, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, okay, and the Word was God. Okay, he was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and with him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Now, if we go on and read further in Genesis, we'll find that there's darkness, and that God created, and God said, "Let there be light," and so there was light. And so there's a lot of harmonization here from later Christian, the Christian committee that published the NKJV and the NIV. We don't know who, because they never say who. With the NRSV is much more open, as well as the JPS. And so the reading here supports when God began to create heavens and earth. Okay. And then when you see later on, there are two creation stories in Genesis here. In the second creation story, the word heaven and earth has been reversed. Okay, earth is mentioned first, then heaven. We will get to that. Now, you'll find it similar that after God created everything, okay, in Genesis 1, God saw that it was good. Okay, we will continue reading here. God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the water, that it may separate water from water." Okay, if you know Enuma Elish, we will get to that. God made the expanse, and it separated the water which was below the expanse from the water which was above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse sky, and there was evening, and there was morning. And this is the second day. Now, if you look at the commentary here, okay, if I can find it. Now, the word translated expanse refers to a piece of metal that has been hammered flat. Here, the function of the sky is to separate the waters above, which fall as rain, okay, from the subterranean waters which rise as springs. Now, we will get to the story of Noah, whereby God opens up the water from above and the water from below, and it fill up the entire earth. Okay. We will continue reading. God said, "Let the water below the sky be gathered into one area, and the dry land may appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gatherings of waters he called seas. And God saw that this was good. Again, this is a similar theme. After God created everything in 6 days, he saw that it was good. Okay. Why? Why did the author of Genesis here, presumably not God, obviously not Moses, why did he mention this many times? Okay, why did he need to repeat himself? Yeah, we will get to that, inshallah. God called the dry land earth, and the gatherings of waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Okay, and God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, seed-bearing plants, fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, seed-bearing plants of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that this was good. Again. And there was evening, and there was morning, a third day. Now, if you have been following along here, you'll realize something, that there was evening and there was day. But once you go to the fourth day, God only started creating the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon. So how can there be light and day, or evening and day, when there's no sun yet? Yeah, this is something that has been puzzling a lot of people. But if you are familiar with the ancient Near East, then this light here is a different kind of light. It is not light about the heavenly bodies. Now, if you look at, I'll not be doing this often, but if you bring it to modern science, okay, there's many different suns out there. Okay, it could be that if you want to harmonize or look at it this way, not that I agree with this, but I've heard some people say this, or even thought of this, that God was referring to the different galaxies. Okay, because different galaxies still has their sun. That means there's still light. Okay, and only in our galaxy, the Earth that we know here, whereby God created the sun that we are able to see, and the moon that we are able to see from Earth. Now, this is, I believe, stretching it a bit too far, because what does the word heaven here really means? Does the word heaven here refers to only our galaxy, or the entire universe? Again, it is open to interpretation, but it is, I believe that it is more towards the entire universe, okay, the heavens and the earth, because the heavens doesn't always refer to, again, if we look at the understanding of Paul, during Paul's day, for example, heaven, Jesus will come down in the clouds of heaven. Okay, heaven is like clouds, or the nearest sky, for example. But that is a later understanding. And so what is the early understanding? For example, the understanding of the author of the book of Genesis. Could it be the same? Again, this portion of the book here, I've not got to this yet, but it is dedicated to the priestly source. Okay, the priestly material came from around the 5th century, 550 according to the datings, by Bart Ehrman, by Michael Coogan, Cynthia Chapman, as well as Hayes, Julius Wellhausen put it at the 6th century also, and there's a lot of the language of the P material is much later, and the Yahweh source, or the J source, is much earlier, it's much more primitive. And so it could be that around the 5th century, because we have Herodotus writing in the 5th century, so it could be that the author of the priestly source understood the cloud of heaven, understood like heaven to be the nearest cloud. But the ancient Egyptians understand things differently. If you look at the history of the Sphinx and the pyramid, they're all facing the eastern equinox, and they are able to understand the different kinds of zodiac. Okay, we call it zodiac today, and so according to the ancient Egyptians, if you want to interpret it this way, they understand that the nearest heaven is actually not the clouds, like Paul would understand it to be. Again, it is open to interpretation, but I see that the ancient world understood heavens to be like the heavenly bodies, and so it is not only referring to the nearest clouds or the nearest sky that we can see. I think this is a later Christian understanding, or possibly the Greek understanding of it. But again, there's a lot of debate towards this. So anyway, we'll move on. God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate day from night." Okay, they shall serve as signs for the set times, the days and the years. Again, this is another problematic statement, if you want to call it problematic this way, because how can there be evening when there's no time? And a lot of scholars have been asking this, that the word time before time exists, does it mean that evening, the evening of before time exists? Okay, this is very difficult to follow along. The evening before time exists, if that makes sense. It basically could mean, I don't know, millions of years, or it could basically means the modern understanding of what is evening, how long, or how much is the duration of evening, depending on where you live, obviously, and the time of the year. And so what does it mean here? Again, there's a lot of interpretation, but it is best to say that I believe the more correct interpretation, and the one that I've subscribed to, would be that the concept of time only exists in the fourth day. Okay, when God created let there be lights in the expanse of the sky, meaning the heavenly bodies, the sun, for example, the moon, the stars have been created. And then before this, time could basically refers to, I don't know, but definitely not the time that we have today, 24 hours, things like that. And this is also another evidence whereby if the sun don't exist, the lights and the evenings and things like that, it means a completely different thing. Now, for an expanded discussion of this, you can refer to the commentaries, but we will not get into that because that would take the entire video. Just quickly before we finish this very first section here, and they serve as lights in the expanse of the sky to shine upon the earth, and it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to dominate the day and the lesser light to dominate the night, and the stars. Okay, the lesser light possibly means moon here, and the greater light possibly means the sun. Okay. Again, if we use modern science, this is actually untrue because the moon doesn't project lights on its own. It reflects the light from the sun. Okay, but the word produce lesser light, it doesn't really mean that the moon produces its own light. Okay, and God set them in the expanse of the sky to shine upon the earth, to dominate the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that this was good. Again, a very similar theme here. Okay. And there was evening and there was morning, a fourth day. God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, the birds that fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." God created the great sea monsters and all the living creatures of every kind that creep, which the waters brought forth in swarms, and all the winged birds of every kind. And God saw this was good. Okay, a common theme. God blessed them, saying, "Be fertile and increase, fill the waters in the sea, and let the birds increase on earth." And there was evening and there was morning, a fifth day. Now, you realize that the same theme here, God says, increase and multiply and be fertile. In this passage here, currently, the fifth day, it is referring to the animals. Okay, it is not referring to the humans, because as you shall see, humans were created last. Okay, in the first creation story, in Genesis chapter 1. And in Genesis chapter 2, we begin that human beings were created first. And so this is a contradiction here, if you want to call it that. Because it's either human was created first or human were created last. But as we go through the documentary hypothesis, you start to find that there will be explanation as to why there's contradictions, okay, and embellishments and literary seams and things just doesn't fit. And and if you go to the flood story of Noah later on, you start to realize that you are halfway through the narrative and then you suddenly found a genealogy. Things fall out of place here. Okay, God said, "Let the earth bring forth every kind of living creatures, cattle, creeping things, and wild beasts of every kind," and it was so. God made wild beasts of every kind and cattle of every kind and all kinds of creeping things on earth. And God saw that this was good. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Okay. They shall rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the cattle, the whole earth, and all the creeping things that creep on earth. And God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fertile and increase. Fill the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep in it." Now, that's a repetition here. God already mentioned. And so, why does God need to mention again, like fill the earth, master it, or rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep on earth? Now, this could be a repetition of emphasis, or it could also show, as some people would argue, that even in the priestly material here, we have some embellishment to it. Okay? And that the later authors here want to preserve both of them, or they could have inserted them to make them repeat. Okay, God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is upon all the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit, they shall be yours for food." Okay, now God doesn't say that I'll give you animals that you can eat. Okay, and so this led scholars to say that the very first human beings were vegetarian. "And to all animals on land, to all the birds of the sky, and to everything that creeps on earth, in which there is a breath of life, I give all the green plants for food." Even animals are vegetarian. Okay. And it was so. And God saw that all he had made and found it very good. And there was evening and there was morning, a sixth day. Now, the chapter 2, verse 1 to 4, verse 1 to 4a is about the Sabbath. Okay, God created everything. Now, I do not have the time right now to go through the different translation. Okay, because we have in the NKJV we have God rested, and then in the Jewish Study Bible we have God ceased from His work. Now, obviously, these are two different theological emphasis here. Now, the NKJV allows for that God became tired, and God need to rest. And the JPS committee obviously saw problems with this. How can God rest, or how can God be fatigued, for example? And so they prefer to use the word cease. That means God stopped working. Doesn't mean that He's tired. Okay. Now, according to the scholars, the committee of the NRSV, the word cease here is a much better rendering of the Hebrew. Personally, I disagree. I believe the NKJV has got it correct. But then again, I'm not a Hebrew scholar anyway. But there are two sides of the coin here. So anyway, that is Genesis 1. In the next video, we will take a look at Genesis 2, inshallah ta'ala. I'll see you on my next one. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.